It was a quiet Wednesday in Redding, California, November 2nd, 2016. The sun rose over tree-lined streets, casting a golden glow on a town that felt safe, almost untouched by the chaos of the outside world. In this close-knit community, neighbors greeted each other by name, and families felt secure letting their children play outside. It was the kind of place where nothing truly bad was supposed to happen. That morning, Sherri Papini, a young mother of two, laced up her running shoes and set out for her usual jog. She was known for her dedication to her family and her daily routines, but on this day, she never returned home. Her husband, Keith, came home to an empty house. The silence was unsettling. Toys were left untouched, the kitchen was quiet, and there was no sign of Sherri or any clue as to where she might be. Desperate, Keith used Find My iPhone and tracked her phone to a lonely stretch of road. There, he found her phone and earbuds abandoned on the ground, as if dropped in haste. Sherri had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and fear. The community sprang into action. Search parties combed the woods, volunteers posted missing person flyers on every corner, and a GoFundMe campaign quickly raised thousands of dollars to aid the search. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers joined together, united by hope and concern. Her disappearance dominated headlines, capturing the nation's attention. News vans lined the streets, and reporters broadcast live updates as the story spread far beyond Redding. The mystery of the missing mom gripped the country. Keith made emotional pleas on TV, his voice trembling as he described the pain of their children and the life they'd built together. Theories swirled. Was it a random attack, a targeted abduction, or something even more sinister? The uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone. Law enforcement chased every lead, interviewing witnesses, reviewing surveillance footage, and searching the surrounding forests. But days turned into weeks, 22 days to be exact, without a single breakthrough. No ransom demand ever came. There were no credible sightings, no mysterious phone calls, just silence and mounting dread. The hope that once united the community began to fade. Candlelight vigils were held, prayers were whispered, and as days passed, people quietly started to take down the missing flyers, fearing the worst. Sherri's life seemed idyllic, almost too perfect. She was a devoted wife, a loving mother, and a friend to many. Photos showed a family full of laughter and love, the kind of happiness people envied. But as the world would soon learn, perfection can hide secrets. Behind closed doors, every family has its struggles, and sometimes the truth is far more complicated than it appears. The story of the missing supermom was about to take a shocking turn. A new development would soon shatter the calm and force everyone to question what they thought they knew. The question on everyone's lips: what happened to Sherri Papini? Rumors and speculation filled the air, as neighbors and strangers alike tried to piece together the puzzle. The search continued, with police and volunteers refusing to give up. But answers remained elusive, and the sense of unease only grew. The community held its breath, waiting for a miracle or a tragedy. And then, after weeks of uncertainty, everything changed, and the truth began to emerge. Thanksgiving morning, 2016. A day that would become unforgettable for the small town of Redding, California. As families prepared for their holiday feasts, a miracle was quietly unfolding on the outskirts of town. A motorist driving along Interstate 5 in the early light spotted a disheveled woman desperately waving for help on the shoulder. That woman was Sherri Papini, missing for 3 weeks and presumed gone forever. Sherri's appearance was shocking. Her body was emaciated, her face and arms covered in bruises, her long blonde hair crudely chopped. Most chilling of all, a fresh brand was seared into her shoulder, a permanent reminder of her ordeal. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, where she was quickly reunited with her husband, Keith. The emotional reunion was filled with tears, relief, and disbelief. From her hospital bed, Sherri recounted a terrifying story. She claimed she'd been abducted by 2 Hispanic women, held captive in a dark room, tortured, starved, and chained for 22 agonizing days. She described being blindfolded, threatened, and left with little hope of escape. News of her survival spread like wildfire. Headlines called her a miracle, and her story became a national sensation, a tale of survival against all odds, inspiring hope and fear in equal measure. Donations and support poured in from across the country. The community rallied around Sherri and her family, organizing vigils, fundraisers, and welcome home celebrations. For a moment, it seemed like a storybook ending. But as investigators began to dig deeper, they noticed troubling inconsistencies. Sherri's injuries, while real, seemed oddly superficial for such a harrowing ordeal. Her descriptions of her captors and their motives were vague, and the circumstances of her release were puzzling. Why would kidnappers suddenly let her go, dropping her on a random stretch of highway in the early morning hours? The details didn't quite add up. Behind the scenes, law enforcement began to quietly question her account, comparing her statements to the evidence they were gathering. While the public still saw Sherri as a hero and survivor, detectives started to see cracks in her story. Details that didn't fit, timelines that didn't match. The more they investigated, the more Sherri's narrative began to unravel. Each new piece of evidence raised more questions than answers. Still, the search for her supposed captors continued. Police canvassed neighborhoods, searched rural areas, and followed every lead. But doubts within the investigation only grew stronger. The perfect victim story was no longer airtight. Whispers of skepticism began to circulate, both in the media and among the townspeople. Investigators pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the headlines and the real story behind Sherri Papini's disappearance. The case was far from over. As days turned into weeks, the investigation only intensified, with detectives working late into the night. The community's relief slowly turned to suspicion. Neighbors who once offered support now exchanged worried glances, wondering what really happened. As time passed, the question lingered. What truly happened during those 22 days Sherri was missing? The mystery deepened with every passing hour. The answers, when they finally came, would shock not just the town, but the entire nation. The investigation was about to take a dramatic and unexpected turn, changing everything the world thought it knew about Sherri Papini's harrowing return. Investigators worked tirelessly, but Sherri's story didn't add up. Her memories were vague, her injuries inconsistent with her claims. She described being held in darkness, yet had tan lines. The brand on her shoulder looked amateurish. Why would her captors release her so far from home? Detectives quietly shifted focus, exploring the possibility that Sherri's story was a fabrication. They re-examined evidence, her past, and her relationships. Publicly, the search for two Hispanic women continued. Privately, a new theory emerged. The kidnapping might be a hoax. The investigation was entering uncharted territory. The truth was more complicated than anyone imagined. For years, the case stalled, until DNA evidence broke it open. Investigators had combed through every lead, but nothing seemed to fit. The community was left with more questions than answers, and the mystery only deepened as time passed. Then, a crucial breakthrough. Male DNA found on Sherri's clothing didn't match her husband. This single clue changed the entire direction of the investigation, raising suspicions and opening up new possibilities that no one had considered before. In 2020, advanced testing identified the source, James Reyes, Sherri's ex-boyfriend. The technology had finally caught up with the evidence, and the truth was about to come out. Investigators confronted Reyes, who revealed a shocking truth. He described in detail how Sherri had contacted him, desperate for help, and how he had reluctantly agreed to her plan. Sherri had orchestrated her own disappearance, staying with Reyes for 22 days. She hid away from the world, creating an elaborate story that fooled everyone, including her own family. She starved herself, inflicted injuries, and asked Reyes to brand her. Every detail was carefully planned to make her story believable, no matter how extreme the measures. Reyes dropped her off on the highway, just as she'd planned. The scene was staged to look like a daring escape, but it was all part of the deception. He provided DNA, passed a polygraph, and was never charged. His cooperation helped unravel the truth, and investigators realized he was not the villain in this story. The story of abduction unraveled. Sherri's ordeal was a hoax. The evidence was undeniable. The case that once gripped the nation was now exposed as a carefully constructed lie. The case had finally cracked wide open. The truth, hidden for so long, was now impossible to ignore. The truth was stranger than fiction. In the end, it was science and persistence that revealed what really happened. Armed with Reyes' confession and hard evidence, agents confronted Sherri in 2022. At first, she denied everything, but the truth was inescapable. Sherri admitted she'd staged the kidnapping, lied to everyone, and collected over $30,000 in victim funds. She was arrested for mail fraud and making false statements. In court, she apologized, admitting her actions had hurt her family and community. She agreed to pay restitution and pled guilty. The supermom was now a convicted felon. The case, it seemed, was finally closed. In September 2022, Sherri Papini was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, double the prosecution's recommendation. The judge cited the harm caused to the community and the justice system. She was ordered to pay over $300,000 in restitution. Sherri served about 10 months before release to a halfway house. The story faded from headlines, but the damage lingered. Her family was shattered, her reputation destroyed. The justice system had spoken, but the story wasn't over. In 2025, Sherri reemerged with a new story, this time claiming she was truly abducted by James Reyes. She recanted her confession, alleging she lied out of fear for her safety. In a docuseries and book, she painted herself as a victim, not a hoaxer. She claimed Reyes kidnapped and abused her, forcing her silence. Sherri argued her guilty plea was an act of self-preservation. Her new narrative contradicted sworn testimony and all previous evidence. The public and law enforcement were skeptical. The case was once again thrust into the spotlight. Law enforcement dismissed Sherri's new claims, standing by their original findings. The evidence, DNA, phone records, and her confession pointed to a hoax. Investigators called her a serial liar seeking attention. James Reyes, who had cooperated fully, remained silent. His testimony had been crucial in exposing the truth. Officials argued Sherri's new story was another attempt to rewrite history. The facts, they insisted, were clear. The official record stood firm against her latest version. Sherri's lies devastated her family. Keith Papini filed for divorce, seeking sole custody of their children. The children, once the center of a national drama, became silent victims. Sherri faced financial ruin and public scorn. Her attempts to rebrand as a victim met widespread skepticism. The case remains a cautionary tale about deception and its consequences. The truth, as always, is elusive. Sherri's story is unfinished, her motives still debated. What comes next is anyone's guess. Stay tuned for more true crime stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature.